Welcome, friends. My name is Jeff, and I'm going to get right to it. I'm in recovery from alcoholism, sex addiction, and drug addiction. I spent more than 40 years struggling with these various addictions. Thank you. I should have known that. Oh, by the way, this says hashtag love Mo, not hashtag love Mo stuff, Mo money. It's for our campaign this weekend for Love Modesto. So just so you're wondering, I might be sitting there thinking, what the heck does Mo mean? There were periods of fruit-bearing time in my life, periods of living morally bankrupt, selfish, and self-centered. I did absurd, incredibly tragic things while drinking and using. I am the oldest of 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and we were raised as a traditional religious family. However, from my earliest memories, my home life was full of alcohol, drug addiction, anger, crime, emotional, physical, and spiritual and sexual abuse. My family of origin was deeply dysfunctional and sick. I learned to keep to myself and live with secrets. I was disconnected from reality. I retreated to a world of fantasy and make-believe. I was a loner, and I did not trust anyone. I left my childhood years, the years where my personality was formed, deeply wounded. It is where my character defects were born. From the ages of 12 to 36, I learned that if I took a substance, whether alcohol, drugs, whatever I get my hands on, I could change how I felt. I could ease the anxiety, the anxiousness, this pressure right here, this discomfort. I could reduce the fears and even for a short time feel normal. During this period of time, 1979 to 1994, I used as often as I could. I lost 2 marriages, experienced the death of my son, and a handful of jobs. And of course, as some of us experienced here, I had legal and law enforcement complications as a result of my addictions. And yes, there were periods of homelessness too. Scott, this is for you. My life was one of repeating the same patterns and habits for many years. Proverbs says, like a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly, right? My life was an endless cycle of drama, repeating the same hang-ups and habits and living in my defects of character. There were times when I tried to change, it would never last. Willpower never worked for me. I read many self-help books, spent time with different counselors talking about my feelings, meeting with religious figures, treatment centers, moving out of town, doing all the things I could do to manage my life and control my outcome. My wanting to change wasn't enough. So let's talk about God as I experienced him. As early as 10, I had a concept of God. It was of Christ. I thought of him as loving, kind, and often went to him when I was in trouble. I treated God, though, for many years as the almighty bail bondsman of my life. In 1995, I reached out to a local church. I was separated again and about to be divorced. I was looking for help. I was searching for a deeper understanding of God and community, not to be alone and for his power to fix my life yet again. October 1995, I surrendered my life to Christ and began a more biblical-based walk with God. However, I would have many more years of work to truly find serenity and consistency and humility. As soon as I began my new journey with Christ, old patterns emerged. My defects lived on in my life. My relationship with God, like the relationships in my life, there were periods of goodness, always followed by a desire to pursue my addictions. So my first years as a Christian man were marked by the same trials and dramas created by my bad choices. In 1997, I began working in Silicon Valley. It is also the time I met my wife, Lori. Lori was kind, good, had a credible work ethic. Her simple yet friendly demeanor was sweet. I pursued Lori in the workplace, despite my bosses not wanting me to spend time doing that. And this began a marriage, friendship, and love of more than 20 years. Now I have found Christ. I found a great woman. I found a career, and yet I struggle with my addictions and shortcomings. It was a constant battle. We eventually moved to Modesto, where I have worked remotely for more than 20 years out of my home. And in 1999, Lori and I had our beautiful, amazing daughter, Hannah, and a few years later, Samuel followed. I now had even more at stake in my battle for fruit-bearing faith. I had a family, I had coworkers, I had a community depending on me to be a leader, to be a spiritual leader and a contributor to life, but I continued to struggle with my habits, hang-ups, and hurts. As a result of my on and off again using and drinking, Lori threw me out of our home in 2003. This time I found an outpatient program. It was there I was first introduced to the 12 steps. I found a sponsor. I worked the 12 steps. I worked an extensive 4-step. I worked through the 9th step with 83 amends, made both financial and relational amends. I learned during this period that I really didn't have an addiction problem. I had a thinking problem, and at the center of that thinking was a selfish, self-centered man who was spiritually sick. I learned that if I sought God, work with others, and clean house, I could grow and expand my spiritual life and stay sober, and it worked for a time. Lori let me come home again, and our lives greatly improved. We also had been attending Big Valley since 1999 and became members in 2003. Summer 2003, I first walked into Celebrate Recovery. I liked the idea of a Christ-centered 12-step recovery. Other programs have a lot of opinions and thoughts about God. That's fine. Not at Celebrate Recovery. Christ is God. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Colossians 1:15. I felt hopeful and encouraged to be part of Big Valley and Celebrate Recovery, and I felt it was a calling in my life. I joined the worship team. I found little places here and there to serve, facilitated or co-facilitated 7-step groups, led small groups in our home, and shared testimonies like I'm doing tonight. I helped other guys the best I could with planting seeds of recovery where I could. I learned a lot about recovery. I learned a lot about myself. However, I made a critical mistake. I came to believe that alcohol was not my problem, that drugs was my core issue. Cunning, baffling, and powerful is a description of the disease of alcoholism according to AA. I was sober, going to AA, having many sober, loving friends who gave me lots of support. I woke up every day grateful to be alive and looking forward to the day. The next thing I knew, I had stopped attending outside recovery meetings and began to pick and choose. This is not a criticism of Celebrate Recovery, but I began to pick and choose Celebrate Recovery addictions to identify with, and then I made a decision to drink one date night. I wasn't sad, mad. In fact, everything was going well in my life. I drank to celebrate my life, right? I drank because I wanted to. That's the thing. It was a fateful decision that almost ruined my life. I brought shame to my family and ruined my reputation. For me, I must remain 100% sober in all areas of my life. If I use drugs, alcohol, pursue sex outside my marriage in any order, I'm in big trouble. Complete abstinence is the only way for me. My work culture is one of taking customers to dinner, trade shows, all of that, with the emphasis on drinking. Drinking in hotels became my way of life. In the final days of my drinking, I had to stop at a local restaurant and end the day with as many margaritas as I could get into me before going home without tipping off Lori too much, but she wasn't fooled, I don't think. So I reached a point for the first time in my life where I could not stop drinking. I had to drink every day. So what I'm saying here is that I became this Jekyll and Hyde guy, right? I show up here on Sundays and look one way, but in my home I was a completely different man. So I was a man that did good things occasionally, but as time passed, there were short periods of me doing good and longer periods of me not doing well at all, including becoming resentful at my wife's increasing health care issues. I became controlling, emotionally abusive. I created a climate of fear and uncertainty in my home. I was daily becoming more spiritually sick. My drinking became increasingly out of control. Then I began to use diet pills and right back to using whatever I could get my hands on the road, and the best I could to pull it off without Lori knowing it. I also began several inappropriate relationships with women, and one leading to a brief affair. And brief isn't to minimize it. I'm just saying, as factually, it was just a brief affair, but still, the damage to my wife was incredible. It devastated her heart. I was completely out of control. February 2014, my life was completely upside down, and one night after returning home from a business trip, completely under the influence, Lori asked me to leave or she was going to call the police. So I'm 50 now, right? And I'm about to lose everything once again. Can it get worse? Yes, it actually does get worse. So I began Operation Save Myself. I had all the recovery knowledge to get back home, I thought. To get back my life. I figured all I had to do was give Lori the right answers, and in a few months, we would be back to normal. I would just buy her a few gifts and, tell her I was wrong. But I had a big surprise waiting for me. Lori reached out to Scott Miller, the Celebrate Recovery leadership, this church, and CR Counseling Services. And at this time, it was Susan Leonard. My plans to manipulate my way home had ended. Because of the extent of the abuse, emotional, substance abuse, and sexual conduct, and Lori's desire to divorce me, the recovery leadership rightly recommended a separation, a timeout. Our family needed recovery for me, for Lori, but most of all to protect our children. The competent, godly leadership of Big Valley Grace and Celebrate Recovery understood that our family was spiritually sick and that addiction is a family illness and that we needed time of professional help to possibly have a restoration. The men and women of this ministry have many years of dealing with families in crises brought on by addictive behaviors and these kinds of scenarios. They have partnered with Christ and seen hundreds and hundreds of marriages, families restored, but sadly, many more lost. They live on the front lines of a war called addiction, and they know what it takes to recover. It was a privilege, not a right, to have their time, help, love, and prayer, and godly, wise counsel. However, I wasn't having any of it, and Lori was determined to have her divorce. And because of my sexual conduct outside the marriage, Lori had a biblical right to divorce and a chorus of supporters for it. I wanted, honestly, to get back home, put a Band-Aid on our problems, wait till things cool down, and get back to the kind of life that I wanted to live. So I played the game, what I thought was a game. I moved out and began to attend a lot of different kinds of recovery meetings and made sure everyone knew it. Facebook, Lori, people here. So sick. I, of course, used my recovery knowledge and tried to convince those around me I was just a poor, pathetic addict needing to get back to the steps. I used my charm and relationships to manipulate anyone I was near, all with the agenda of getting home, getting back to the status quo. That's where I could live in my addiction. The behavior was all about me wanting to control my uncertain future. I could not deeply empathize with Lori's devastation, her broken heart. All I could think about was getting back my old life, about me. At this time, I was deeply resentful about being outed. Again, all about me. I was furious that people were meddling in my marriage, a delusion I believed. I had lost all control. My attempts to control Lori externally finally forced professional people to step in and restrict all communication except for kids by text only, which I abused as well. I was not getting recovery. Intellectually, I understood how it worked. However, I could not get it from my head to my heart where change happens. I was going to meetings, praying, and seeking professional help. However, I believed I still could control the outcome. I believe I could affect the outcome in my favor. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out, Romans 7:18. I could not get past this step. I knew it. I knew what it means. I could teach it, but I couldn't get it from here to here. I did not believe I was powerless or my life was unmanageable. I believe I could still control everything. The steps worked in order, and I couldn't even get to the first step. For me, this was frustrating. I knew what I should do, but I could not do it. So I decided 3 weeks into our separation that to demonstrate my humility and commitment to God and my family and my church, the smart thing would do would be get a motorcycle and a girlfriend. The height of arrogance and pride and sickness. My flesh sinfulness produced selfishness and conceit. All I thought about was gratifying me, and I just was so sick when I wrote this, looking back on that. Though I wasn't drinking or using drugs yet, I absolutely was using having a sick woman prop up my insecurities and fears, tell me how great I was, all that crap. For me, it was a mind-altering substance to once again fix me. Sicker yet, I thought I could fool everyone. But I wasn't. And God absolutely protected my family from my pathetic schemes and lies. I Googled that if you drink water, you'll stop crying. It works, babe. I did. Absolutely. And as God would have it, Lori soon discovered my hidden relationship. I thought, go ahead, divorce me. You get everyone off my back. I could live the way I wanted. I ruined this thing anyway, so whatever. What can I do about it now? To be clear about this church, it has a biblical view of marriage. And I had no cause to walk away from this marriage. We were still married, though living apart, and this was an affair. And I was wrong. No compromise, no sympathy. This is Christ's standard, and I failed to meet his standard. Devastated, Lori took steps, hired an attorney, and began a legal separation with the intent of divorce. Lori was struggling with her health issues, going to Stanford alone for treatment. My 8-year-old son, Samuel, had lost his dad. And my beautiful 14-year-old daughter was in her room in considerable emotional pain. What shame and suffering had I brought on my family? Was this my bottom? What do you think? No, that's right. I then lost my job. Just what my family needed. I met another woman. I began to drink and use regularly. Let's go for it now, right? Lori, now fully supported by this church and with her recovery support, making huge leaps in her own healing, took final steps to remove me from seeing the kids for their safety. That's what you do. You protect your children at all costs. Lori also served me with dual restraining orders. I'm kind of special. One won't work for me. I needed two. A klets, so you can't go anywhere in the country. My church requested for the spiritual safety of this community that I step away, and I did, and they were right. I was not spiritually safe to be around godly people with my attitude. All I had left was AA and my sponsor. I had used everyone else. I was now homeless. I had no job, no family. It was gone. I found my bottom, but nobody was around to care. Up to this point, all I had to do was follow a simple separation plan outlined by this ministry and give my family space and allow Christ to work in my life, but I couldn't even do that. I fought God, pride and arrogance, but He easily won. He allowed me to find the end of myself. He just was not going to allow me to hurt my family any longer. To encounter an almighty God who could never lose, who has never been defeated, who will have His way, He does not enable. That led me to surrender and finally admit defeat in my heart. I was spiritually at step one. I was powerless to defeat Him or anyone in my life, and I understood what unmanageability meant. I had no control. So I prayed this prayer: God, I will remain sober and single the rest of my life. Again, this is important because I had no cause to divorce my wife. And to be in right relationship with Him and experience His healing, I had to be willing to obey Him and trust Him. If that meant the rest of my life, that's what I had to do to be sober. I had to obey Him and I had to trust Him to have true sobriety, no matter the cost. That's what it means. I further prayed I will quietly take care of the needs of my family without asking anything in return. Please help me. I called my sponsor. He found a sober living home for me to move into. Is this odd or God? It was 1 block away from Scott Miller's house. Every day that guy would drive by my house and pray for me. I'd see him. Keep it going, buddy. Keep coming back. So at the age of 50, I'm living a sober living home. That's what men do when they're 50 years old. Jobless, alone. So I found a local job to take care of my family's court-ordered financial needs. I ended contact with women, stayed sober, attended meetings. I received court-ordered supervised visits with the kids every weekend at Starbucks for 2 hours. I stayed quiet. That's what my friend Gordon taught me. I didn't bother anyone, and I began to rework the 12 steps. I found in the 4th step, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. And in this place, I found peace and purpose I hadn't experienced in a long time. And I began to quietly grieve the harm to my family, friends, and church I had caused. My sponsor kept me afloat, reminding me good would come from this tragedy. All I can say is that day I prayed and I surrendered His will. My life began to change almost immediately, and I trusted Him. I never once asked God to bring me home. Instead, I prayed for Lori to heal, for my family to heal. Sobriety and new relationship with God helped me to regain sound spiritual thinking that had eluded me for some time. There's an idea in the big book that means a lot to me. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and new happiness. We will not regress the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we had gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. One day I made kids picture books of our family times. In those books I included pictures of Mom, but not Mom and I. That might be confusing to them. I just wanted to encourage them that they were loved. I gave them their little books on one of my visits. They, of course, were thrilled, and they ran home and told Mom. I didn't want her to know, but there they are. That wasn't my intent. That night I received a text from Mom that says simply, "Thank you." Did I rush in with a 14-page text? That would have been me in the past. I just said, "You're welcome." It was so simple. You're welcome. Lori saw something different in my visits, in my text responses. She would text me occasionally, but I would only respond, never pushing in, never asking. Eventually, we began to communicate. I think she was curious about what had changed. Lori was not my focus. Work and recovery is where I kept my energy. Scott Miller once told me that those around me would see change before I did, that change would be evident in my speech, thinking, and even how I looked. Over time, Lori and I began a slow reconciliation, including Christ-centered biblical counseling. There were no guarantees. Lori had the right and freedom to choose to reconcile or divorce, and she would be within the will of God to do so. Frankly, I had no say about it. And however, in February 2015, we did reconcile. Hey, thank you. And I've been completely sober since October 10th of 2014. Yeah. That's cool. So I like to say often in meetings, God did for me what I could not do for myself. And I always love to throw this in. It's not what I say about my recovery. Listen, we're all good talkers. Many of us have talking professions. Right? I'm a talker. I get paid to do that. Scott gets paid to talk. There's teachers here. There's all kinds of talkers here. And I spent my whole life telling you how great I was and how good I was doing, and it was a lie. So what I say about my recovery really doesn't matter as much as what my wife has to say, what my children have to say, what my church has to say, what my community, my coworkers have to say about my recovery. It wasn't a spiritually sick wife that reconciled with me, but a woman with strong recovery that decided I had changed and I could come home. Lori's obedience to God is remarkable. She's the hero here, Christ and my wife, and her stand in obedience to his word. Our lives are transformed beyond explanation. Lori and I love our programs, our sponsors, our service work, and it's great to have a partner to talk recovery to. True story, Lori and I attended Christ-centered marriage counseling. However, our individual 12-step programs were so effective, we needed to meet only half a dozen times to just really talk about trust and set boundaries. The recovery, the 12 steps had really transformed us. We just stayed on our side of the street and just dealt with our marital issues with the help of a trained professional, and we moved on pretty quickly. Our mutual recovery has strengthened and transformed our marriage. Our family illness has been addressed. Today, I live one day at a time, and there's another little idea that I love. It's in a big book out of page 164. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand him. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. So to the newcomer and those returning again, I say, we stay sober one day at a time, or when necessary, 1 hour at a time. We try to break life into small pieces that we can handle. We do our job. We solve our problems. So we clean up our past one mess at a time. And we try to turn our wills over to the care of Christ. We stay quiet. We stop talking all the time. And we learn to listen. I'm grateful to Lori for her steadfastness, for doing what is right. Lori's own step work and uncompromising boundaries greatly helped propel me in my own recovery work. I am grateful to my sponsor, Anthony, who is listening in Idaho, and to Gordon, who's sitting right there, who hung in with me despite my insanity. I'm grateful to Scott and Christine Stubbert. I know Scott is kind of jokey and funny, but I'll tell you what, when you're in trouble, he gets very serious with the Lord and you. It's awesome. And Christine Stubber, who spoke words of wisdom and encouragement to my wife at the right times. They minister to my entire family. They never stop praying for us. I'm grateful to Scott Miller. We've known each other for a long time. And he's done incredible things for me and for our family. I could never repay him. He often called Lori weekly to check in with her. Maybe he just wanted to see if I was bothering her or not. I don't know. But he was there to protect her when I wasn't and make sure that she was okay. What a privilege, not a right. And I'm going to tell you something. I am truly, truly grateful for the pastoral elders and ministry leadership of Big Valley Grace Community Church for providing the gift to Celebrate Recovery and taking an uncompromising stand for Christ. No compromises, no watered down stuff. You're going to get it from the Bible, and you may not like it, but you're going to get it. I'm going to finish with this. 2 Timothy 4:18. The Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you for sharing your story today. I encourage you guys, you see Jeff around, you see his wife Lori around, don't be afraid to share how his story impacted your life and what part of it touched your heart. Hey, let's close our time with the Serenity Prayer, and then we'll head off to our open share groups. And so let's pray with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Amen. We'll see you guys after.